welcome to today's lunchtime lesson. We're doing a focus today on the word so. And the reason I've chosen so is because it's one of these words that I've noticed with experience that a lot of students can't quite use correctly. And there's a reason for that, and that's because it's a really common word, but we have lots of different uses for it. So we have different functions for the word so, but we also have lots of expressions with the word so. And the pronunciation that we use with it also depends on which function we're using, right? So of course, it's confusing because we have all of these different things that are happening. So if we think about it's also, you'll notice how much I use the word so, which is fascinating as well, because when I transcribe these classes to put on our blog, the word so appears about 1 million times, right? So I just used it again. Yeah, we use it all the time. So the main ways that we use so is, in terms of functions, is as a modifier, as a linker, and as a discourse marker. And if you're not sure what those mean, don't worry, because I'm going to give you examples for each of them as we go along. Okay. So, starting with so as a modifier. So what that means is we use it with an adjective, or we use it with much and many and a noun to modify the adjectives and to modify the nouns. The same way that you would say, for example, very. Okay, right? So I would say something is so beautiful or very beautiful. It's the same function. Yeah. To give you some examples, right? The film was so boring that I fell asleep. So what I'm doing is I'm modifying the word boring to make it more intense. Okay. He has so much money, he can buy anything. So again, by using so much or so many, we are intensifying the noun. Yeah, we're making it more intense. Please be careful. If I tell you that we can use so as a modifier, how strong do you think that modifier is? So you can think about you can think about quite being like 50% and absolutely being 100%. What do you think so is? What percentage would you give so? Pop it in the chat box for me. Okay, 70% from Celia, 110 from Raquel, 100% from Adolfo. Okay, so we've got a few mixed ideas there. So is quite often misunderstood with its intensity. It is a really strong modifier, though. Yeah, and it's closer to absolutely than it is to very, right? And that's what I want us to think about. So if we had it on our scale here, I would put very about there, I would put absolutely at the top, and I would put so really like closer to absolutely. Yeah. So very often when we're using so, we're maybe using it incorrectly because we think it's not as strong a modifier as it is. The other important thing when we're using so as a modifier is we need to consider our pronunciation of it. Okay. So it's a strong modifier, and that means that your voice and your intonation have to reflect that. Yeah. If I say, I'll give you an example, I'm so tired. If I don't emphasize this, I'm so tired, how do I sound? You're so friendly. You're so pretty. You're so funny. Yeah. If I'm not emphasizing it, I can sound sarcastic. And that can actually be that can be quite rude. Yeah, potentially it can be an embarrassing situation if you're speaking to somebody. When we're using these, we need to make sure, like with any strong modifier, that your voice is reflecting it. Okay, so you can try repeating with me at home, guys. Yeah, I'm so tired. We had so much fun. Yeah, so you really need to make it quite long and make sure that you're emphasizing it when you're using it this way. Okay, the other way that we're going to look at so, which is really common, is as a linker. So what I mean by that is connecting sentences. Yeah, so we have two uses for it. The first one is to show a result or effect. For example, I was tired. And the result of me being tired is I went to bed. Yeah. I was tired, so I went to bed. You could change that to give you another linker that you would use there. I was tired, consequently, I went to bed. That's what we're expressing. The other way that we can use so as a linker is to talk about reason or to express an intention. For example, I moved to London so that I can be closer to my family, right? So why did I move to London? To be closer to my family. The register of this is a fairly neutral register, okay? Neutral to informal. And when we're using so, we need to follow this pattern, okay? You don't need to use that. We can omit it, but what we do need to use is follow it with a modal verb, right? So I can use can or could or will or would. Yeah. So I'm moving to London so that I will be closer to my family, for example. Yeah. But that's an important pattern that we need to follow. Here, the pronunciation is different. We don't stress it like we did when it's functioning as a modifier. I don't say I was tired, so I went to bed. It's much softer. Okay. I was tired, so I went to bed. Yeah. And what I've noticed sometimes with students is that quite often you're saying a sentence using so correctly, but because you're using a different intonation, it sounds like you're making a mistake. Okay. Even though grammatically you're not. Yeah. So, just in terms of exams, for example, these are things which are important because in a speaking exam, it could be misunderstood as an error or sound wrong as an error when you're not actually making an error in terms of grammar, although you are maybe making that mistake in pronunciation. So just make sure that when we're using it this way, I moved to London so that I was tired, so I went to bed. We've got that softer intonation. It's not like in our other examples when we would say it's so expensive or I'm so happy or he has so many cars. Yep. Okay. The next one we're going to think about, which is the one I've said about a million times today, is when we use so as a discourse marker. A discourse marker, guys, is a word that we use just to organize our speech. It doesn't have necessarily any specific meaning, but it gives important information to the listener because that way they can understand how you're organizing information. Yeah. So they exist in all languages. Everyone's a Spanish speaker on the call today. An example of that in Spanish or the equivalent to this in Spanish would be pues. So if you were to say something like, or bueno, okay, those words, they're not actually giving any important information in terms of the message you're communicating, but they're giving the listener important information about what you are going to do with your language. We use so as a discourse marker at the start of sentences to introduce information, which is what I've been doing a lot today. Yeah. To give you an example. So today we're going to talk about modifiers, right? And I'm using that to introduce what I'm going to talk about. So what do you think about the Olympics? Yep. And then when we use so as a modifier to introduce information, we very often reply to it with the word well. If I say to you, so what do you think about the Olympics? You might reply to me and say, well, to be honest, I think they're a terrible idea. Yeah. We do it like this. Okay. So this is another really, really, really common use of the word so. And again, the intonation and the pronunciation is different, right? So if I'm using it as a discourse marker, the intonation changes. To illustrate that for you guys, it would look like this. Yeah. So, okay, try repeating that with me. So, yeah. Try making the sound without saying the word. Hmm. Hmm. Okay. So, what's your name? If I don't do that intonation and I use the softer intonation when it's a linker, for example, so what's your name? Yeah, it's changing the information I'm giving my listener, and it's going to make it confusing to what I'm trying to communicate, right? Intonation is so much more important than we think it is. All right. Now, as well as these functions of so, we also have a lot of expressions which use the word so. And I'm going to get you guys to work with a partner now. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at these expressions here, okay? And I want you to match them with their function, with their definition, sorry. Let's have a look at our answers and see how you guys got on. So the meal was so-so. It was so-so means the meal was like average and low, between average and low quality. Okay. Even so, I think we should do it. So despite what has been said. So if I were to say, someone said to me, "Oh, it's really expensive to join a gym," and I would say, "Even so, I think we should do it." So despite it being expensive, we should still do it. I go to the theatre every so often means I go occasionally. Yeah. It cost £5 or so is a way for me to say approximately. Okay. He has a so-called qualification. It's to say that somebody or something is not suitable. It's not authentic, right? So he's a so-called teacher, but I don't consider him to be a professional teacher or a good teacher. So long. See you soon is just a way to say bye. So long. I should be so lucky. So all of the expression there, guys, is to think that it's something that is extremely unlikely to happen, right? Oh, well, wait till you win the lottery. I should be so lucky, right? I'm not going to win the lottery. If there's any 80s children, you might remember a song by Kylie Minogue. You know, I should be so lucky, 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 lucky. I should be. No 80s children. Okay, I feel old now. I'm at work so as to get a promotion. So this is quite a formal linker that we're using here, and it means in order to. Yeah, so it's a more formal way to say in order to. I told you so. What your mother probably has said to you a million times in your life. Yeah. So after somebody has told you not to do something, basically, or said, that's not a good idea because this will happen, and then it happens, and they say, I told you so. Okay. So what if I don't want to go? And what we're using that by so what just means who cares, right? Yeah. So, oh, that's this is bad for the environment. So what? I don't care. Okay. So there's some really nice, useful expressions here that you can really use in your everyday life. In terms of exams, if you're thinking about doing exams, there's some brilliant expressions there that you could incorporate quite easily into both speaking and writing that would look really impressive to the examiner. Yeah. My challenge to you this week is to try and use at least one of those expressions in a sentence.